Okay. Well, great. Welcome, everybody. My name is Kyle Oliver, and I have the tremendous privilege of working for our other keynoter, Lisa Kimball, in the Center for the Ministry of Teaching at Virginia Theological Seminary. I've been there about a year and a half, and my job title is Digital Missioner and Learning Lab Coordinator, which means it's my job to help the Center for the Ministry of Teaching, which has been around for, coming up on 30 years, to do its work of resource sharing and training and equipping leaders for faith formation, but to do it in various digital ways. So sometimes that's spreading digitally the word about sort of analog opportunities and books in our collection in Key Hall up at Virginia Seminary. And then other times that is really thinking about how does technology actually fit into this work that we're doing. And so this topic for today is very much in that sort of a vein. This link got cut off weirdly, but these slides are available at bit.ly/formahff for hybrid faith formation. So if you want the slides, they're there. I tweeted out the link from, I think, my account, maybe the CFT. So there's multiple ways to get to these slides. Don't let that be an interest to you. So basically what I want to do today is tell you a little bit about how this program that we are calling the Hybrid Faith Formation Network Initiative, how it got started. And I hope that will be useful. I think that's not just about backstory that you don't care about. I think it came from a place of what we sense is a deep need in the church. And I think that story of getting this thing started has all kinds of helpful lessons built in. And then I'll tell you about this program itself, what we've been up to, how it's going, how you can get involved, and then at the end we'll talk resources and actually how you might consider doing something like this in your congregation. I will say, and I won't be offended, we've written a fair bit about this in the CMT. If you've come across that stuff and you start to feel like, oh, he said this all before, and you want to slip into a new session, that's totally fine. I hope that we'll have some conversation and some contributions from everyone. But this is a song we've been singing a lot, and so don't worry if you decide you want to hear a different one. I hang out next to St. Francis at this desk in Key Hall in the CMT. I'll be hopefully looking a little less dopey than that, but probably not. And so I take calls, all day, or more likely emails and tweets and various things, from people just like you who are calling to try to get connected with some resource for their work of faith formation. And sometimes that is a very specific question, like, do you have such and such curriculum? Does it include X, Y, Z? But more and more often, they're much more general questions. I would say sort of ministry model-oriented questions. We are having this problem. What do you recommend for this? We're out of ideas about X. What do you, blah, blah, blah. And those are, I think, in a lot of ways, the more interesting and exciting questions, because people have gotten over the idea that a curriculum is going to solve whatever problem you have. I joke, and it's pretty much not a joke anymore, that when people call up and say, what curriculum should I be using? I really want to say, who cares? There are lots of good ones. I'm not ripping on curriculum. I'm pro-curriculum. I spend a lot of time talking about curriculum. But I think how we are using whatever curriculum we choose is way more important than which one we're using. And I think there are some real questions about the sort of setting for ministry and the setting for teaching and learning that these curricula were written for. Are those settings still the ideal, still relevant, still working, whatever question you want to ask? So we get this question all the time, sort of, what do we do with these people who they say they want to learn, they say that they're hungry, they say that they just don't have a good grounding in the Bible, they don't have a strong relationship with Jesus. I mean, all the stuff that you've been hearing from Trisha and Lisa that people are really hungry for. They tell us over and over again, we want all of that, but we don't want to come to Bible study every Tuesday night. We don't want to come to the year-long catechumenate class that meets for 2 hours every Wednesday evening. They don't want to, whatever. And this I've just come to believe that like almost every church is facing some version of this problem. The sort of old models for how we do substantial teaching and learning in a sort of program way are just not working in a lot of places because we sort of no longer have a monopoly on Wednesday nights or whatever it may be. I remember having believe it or not, a handbell choir director years ago who just could not believe it when he heard that we had a school thing scheduled for Wednesday night. That was supposed to be church night. 15 years, 20 years later, that's just laughable. And we shouldn't be shaming our people for being in that situation. And moreover, I think we should be commending some of them for saying, you know what, enough is enough with the chaos in my life. I've made 15 trips this week to take my kids here, there, and the other thing. And that whatever benefit I'm going to get for coming to this weeknight thing may or may not just add to that chaos. And right now is not a good time for me to commit to the every Tuesday night policy. So the situation, and you probably all know well, is that we are forming the hell out of about 15% of the you know who they are? They are people like my mother. They are people who are just faithful members of the congregation, and they will come to everything. She's retired. She's got this time in her life right now where she really wants to grow in her faith. She wants to see her friends. All the things, and all of it good. But but my mother is like a small percentage of the parishioners at her church. And so how do we reach that other, whatever it is, 85%? This talk is all about one model that we think is promising and that we started sort of coaching some congregations in trying to do something about this very problem. So we're just going to watch one little video. This is a video by Lee Rainey, who works for the Pew Internet American Life Project and wrote this book called Networked, the New Social Operating System. It's really, really smart book about just how we're functioning culturally. This gives us some, I think, helpful perspective on just the cultural situation that we're facing now, and I think this is like really relevant to the church. As the little graphic things were going by, and it was doing the an era of, what did he call it? An era of like broadcast, what was it? Broadcast media, however he said it. That was in the church. That was the Wednesday night class. Everyone please come and sit there, and this one person will, talk to you. And, and we're all educators here, like some of us do that better than others. Some of us know that you need to be, active and, breaking in small groups, and we know about learning styles and yada, yada, yada. But there's still this sense of like, hey, all you people, gather around this sort of centralized point of conversation. And that we know that something different is happening in the media ecology that all of our people participate in and that we participate in. And so I think Lee's work here gives us some basis for rethinking how we do certain kinds of ministry. And when we hear about networked individualism in this faith context, or when we heard about it, what it reminded us of was this Faith Formation 2020 project that John Roberto, who many of you know, was aware of. And they are certainly responding to these kinds of trends in that project. And in it, they proposed this idea called a faith formation network. So, you know, when you go to one of John's workshops, John says, don't build a program, build a network. And so what he's talking about there is, don't just say, come for this space that we've all held on Wednesday night, but rather instead, here are a bunch of ways that you as an individual can get connected with various opportunities to teach, learn, serve, etc. And so you can always spot people who have been to John's workshops because they're building these little websites that's called like St. Andrew's Faith Formation Network or Faith Formation Resource Center. And they're all done on Weebly because Weebly is the web website tool that John knows well and recommends to people. And they're popping up all over the place, and they're giving individual parishioners a place to go to look for quality, curated, trusted resources that you as faith formation leaders in a congregation want to lift up for them as a way of supporting their work of growing in faith. But of course, just pointing someone to a website and saying go nuts is probably not gonna get the job done, right? We want to really do some work on the networked part of networked individualism. And so what we propose is taking that general idea of a faith formation network and making it a little concrete by combining it with a sort of classic small group ministry structure, where what you're doing is building small groups of not more than 10 people in your congregation who gather for a set period of time to engage in some activity together. And then at the end of that intentional set-aside time, make a decision to continue on, to stop, to split and form new groups, to find a new topic, raise up new leaders, all those sorts of things. So we wrote about this kind of thing a lot. And last year at the Forma conference, I want to underscore this is like a really organic thing. Last year at the Forma conference, I was standing in the exhibit hall with the CMT stuff. And Dave Smith-Pritchard, who is here, although she's turned looking at Lisa, who is here at the conference, and you should go say hi. She came up to me and said, "Okay, I read your stuff on Don Roberto, but how do we do this? How would we actually build a faith formation network in a congregation in a way that would be recognizable to people as some kind of church program?" I think what the first iteration of this work, it was very good work, on faith formation networks did was say, like, here's a really conceptual idea. What me and Day did, basically standing there chatting about it over that day, was flesh out, here's how one instantiation of that very general idea might look. And I'll get to that little list in a second. But we basically made a plan for, okay, how would you actually launch one of these? How would you plant a network? How would you train or be the leader of that group and engage in some learning together? So Dave came up to us and said that, and we kind of got to work. And so this is what we proposed as one possibility for actually trying something like this, taking advantage of these various trends we've looked at, but also knowing what we know about the importance of incarnational, relational ministry, the community gathered, sacraments, breaking bread, all that stuff. We tried to sort of strike a balance between the old Wednesday night class and this new approach, taking advantage of networks. So we said, okay, get your people together on some kind of hub. And I'll talk about that later, but that might be a sort of a closed Facebook group is, I think, the ideal way to do this if your people are on Facebook. So get them all connected to each other. Gather them once a month to meet in person and do some real relationship building, some trust building. You get to know each other. You can do some good teaching depending on what it is you're actually learning with this group or working on. In Day's case, they call this Sunday fishing. The program is called FISH, Families Integrating Sundays and Home. And so once a month they do Sunday fishing, and it's some kind of intergenerational gathering where they do some service and they do some learning. They have a meal, and it's once a month. All of these families come, and it's just terrific. But we don't want to lose sight of that, and I think this is an important component for selling something like this to a group of people. You want to say technology can enrich and supplement our relationships, but we wouldn't want it to replace getting together and being the body of Christ in person, at least when that's possible. If someone works Sundays, if someone, fill in your reason why this might be a way of catching some folks who aren't particularly well served by our traditional programming. But by and large, we want to think of this as supplementing. And then finally, via this hub, you as the leader are then sort of leading the group in trying some faith at home activities that are appropriate for the group that you've gathered, that hopefully has said, hey, we want to learn about X. In Day's family, or in Day's case, and this is another question that we just get all the time, what the families were saying is, we want to learn how to pray at home. We want to learn how to read the Bible at home. Our parents are committed to raising their kids up in the faith, but they tell us they don't know how and they need help. So that was where FISH was born, Families Integrating Sunday at Home. And so every week, Day gives them some stuff to be engaged with in the home, and then hopefully gets them talking about it via the hub. How did that go? We'll look at some examples in a little bit, but those are sort of the three components. Get everyone connected, gather them periodically in person, which many of you, that's probably the direction you started to go with your formation program anyway. Seasonal, intergenerational faith formation is on the rise, and I think that's a very good thing. And then in the in-between times, take advantage of what we've always known, and that now we know empirically and in great detail, that the most important place where faith is formed is the home. And so technology gives us an opportunity to reach people when they are in the very place where faith formation happens most robustly. And so that's sort of the game plan. I can pause there at this point. Does anyone have any questions before I talk about kind of what we did to this big group?
In the time between the monthly meetings with people, are you doing something with them, like maybe offering a question for them to consider over the course of the week, or maybe a way for them to
absolutely
log back and forth?
Yeah, we'll go there. Yeah, but that's definitely that's in many ways what this is all about. Okay, so in those moments there, at the CMT booth at Formal last year, we sort of said, well, wouldn't it be cool if you weren't the only person doing this? In Day's case, she had a really supportive rector and a really supportive vestry. But this was in her case, it was a pretty extreme measure. Did people see her article about shutting down the Sunday school?
Yeah.
Did you see? Okay. That article kind of blew up. Was it just last week?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we're talking about here. It's that day, that program. So she said, we're not doing church anymore. This is what we're doing instead, which is a more dramatic thing than what some of the other congregations involved did. But we said today, like, wouldn't it be helpful if you weren't the only person going out on that limb? And wouldn't it be helpful if you yourself were in a little learning network of people who themselves were running learning networks? And so we kind of came up with this parallel process whereby Kyle and Lisa here in the center are the leaders of a learning network that was very much one of these little hybrid small groups. And we met once a month or so with a bunch of leaders that then went out and were leading groups like this in their own contexts. So in this sort of central group with Kyle and Lisa, we're talking about how do you recruit people for this program? How do you get them connected via technology? How do you, how do you ask them good questions? How do you provide the right kinds of activities? And then they, in more or less parallel, concurrent fashion, are taking that back to their contexts and are in great sort of reflective practitioner mode, trying this new thing out. And they're bringing their questions. This should have been a two-way arrow. They're then bringing their questions back and bringing their best practices back. It was so cool. The group meeting that we had after Day's first Sunday fishing class, just to feel the energy that she had brought back from that Sunday gathering, where instead of like trying to drag people to weekly Sunday school, with volunteers who just were committed and all this stuff, instead they said, hey, let's come once a month and celebrate and learn together. And the energy that came out of that was really cool, and I think was a great encouragement to people in this group who were dipping their toes in a little more gently. We had a pretty wide range of people involved in this little initiative. In fact, let me skip and tell you about them first. So we had 7 congregations slash dioceses. One of the people was a diocesan officer, and we said, if you want to do something that this label of hybrid network applies to, we want you involved. This was not a come and administer the curriculum that we give you. This was a come with whatever you're trying, and we'll walk with you. And so we had 7 folks. This is Day here. She's the minister for families, half-time at a pastoral-sized suburban parish, and she wanted to convene this network of families learning to practice their faith at home. We had a volunteer leader who was basically the Christian Ed committee chair at a congregation where their faith formation was structured that way. We had a person who was a diocesan officer, and she was kind of doing what we were doing. She was trying to convene a group of the faith formation folks in her diocese with the hope of equipping them to do precisely this kind of work. One thing I should say about this group here. Notice that this is not particularly high tech here. And that's because this guy said, I like your idea. I like this idea of a sort of flipped classroom, small group initiative. But we don't really have the bandwidth for something new right now. But we're doing these, what are they called? Forum dinners?
Foyer.
There we go, thank you. Foyer dinners. What if we just incorporated some sort of teaching and learning stuff into these foyer dinners and sort of said, okay, for the first 20 minutes of your foyer dinner, or the last 20 or somewhere in between, what if we had them talking about a spiritual practice that then they would try out in the intervening time? So there's the at-home part in the middle weeks. And if they want to be connected online, fine, but this is a sort of aging congregation, and he wasn't optimistic about that. And we said, great, maybe all you do is email or print a hard copy of a little description of that spiritual practice for the week. And that was as high-tech as this one was. So, there's lots of different, and what I liked about that was he was just really clear, this isn't quite what we need, but it sounds like what we need, and could we try that, and could I still be a part of this? And it was great. We had a priest at a very large suburban parish doing something very similar to what Dave was up to. We had folks who were primarily targeting Sunday school teachers. They had a big, robust Sunday school program. They're not about to shut it down. It's a good thing in their congregation. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And what they wanted to do was a network to support their Sunday school teachers. So, again, not rocket science. They just put all their Sunday school teachers on Facebook, and it was a sort of colleague group for those Sunday school teachers, where the leader of that initiative could check in with them about how their preparation was going, see what kind of needs that they had, all that sort of thing. So I hope what the big chart here convinces you of is this could mean a lot of different things. It's a really flexible idea. Certainly being involved with this informal coaching program that we did, we were very flexible about that. But all of these efforts were united by this idea. It's sort of a flipped classroom idea. Like, we're going to gather and do the really important stuff together. The stuff we have to do together. And the stuff that is learning on your own, we're going to build some structures to support people as they engage in those faith practices and in that learning on their own. So back up for a second here. The curriculum, such as it was for our little learning group, was very much designed to try to help people think about teaching and learning and faith formation in this sort of digital context. So Julie, who I think came in at some point, maybe she left again. Julie's book, Faith Formation 4.0, was one of our sort of texts that we did give some little reading assignments out of. And then Meredith Gould's Social Media Gospel was particularly valuable. The first 5 or 6 chapters of this book, and they're really small chapters, are just so good. She talks a lot about social media habits across generations. She talks about social media habits as they relate to different learning styles. The whole book is great, but the first 5 or 6 of these little bite-sized chapters are just, it's worth the price of the book right there. And so together, these 2 books really gave what we hope is a sort of academic isn't the right word, but pedagogically robust framework for the work that these faith formation ministers in different contexts were doing. And so that was our way of sort of jump-starting some of the good questions, because we don't. This isn't a curriculum. We don't have the scope and sequence. We don't have the leader guide. We don't have all of the stuff that encapsulates that wisdom that faith formation professionals and well-trained volunteers. All the stuff that encapsulates that we then can hand to someone and say, here's what you need. We don't have that yet for this model because sort of no one's done this before, or at least not sort of under this name. And that was one of the big pieces of pushback we got, was basically, where's your data that suggests this is a good idea? And I just kind of said, we don't have any. This is, we're just trying this. But this initiative engaged together in trying this out in a at least semi-formal, structured way, I think hope is a first step toward that. And we did, if anyone's interested, we did write a paper about this for the Religious Education Association conference back in November in Boston, and got some nice feedback on that and a couple other initiatives. The paper builds on the academic idea of communities of practice. It's a literature some of you are probably familiar with, but anytime we're trying something new, and especially when we're trying something new that requires a skill set that we don't have, perhaps, or that we're nervous about, things like using a Facebook group to try to teach, a class on spiritual practices. Anytime we're in that situation, we do better if we're in community. We do better if we are regularly reflecting with other people doing the same thing. And that communities of practice language we found really helpful for our own sort of semi-academic, Lisa really academic, because she's going with a PhD, reflection on all this. So I thought what we would do for basically the rest of the session is I've got just a couple more slides on a little bit of how-to type stuff, a little bit of resourcing, a little bit of where to from here stuff, but there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and many of you are probably doing things like this that you hadn't even thought of. As I've pitched this to more and more people, I've heard them say, oh yeah, we kind of do that with our newsletter. There's always something faith formational in our parish newsletter, or what have you. So chime in as I go along here, but I just want to say a few things about ideas that we have about how to make this work, and then I want to just go totally open and just talk. So some content ideas. Again, there's no straightforward answer to how do we actually fill in the content of one of these networks. No one's writing hybrid faith formation small group curriculum, but there's a lot of good stuff out there that I think one can use to that effect. And indeed, some of our participating groups are thinking about or are using stuff like this. I think probably the best is the stuff from Vibrant Faith at Home by Vibrant Faith Ministries. What Vibrant Faith at Home is a pretty rich and growing every season library of what we would call lesson plans for parents to use at home. So we wouldn't want to call them lesson plans because that's like too much, sort of too formal. So they're faith at home activities designed for different types of families. There's young family, teen family, couple. I forget all of the different gradations of it. But it's a really rich library of activities written by people who know how to write lesson plans, know how to help walk someone with very little training through an activity. So especially for these prayer at home groups, there's a whole category of Vibrant Faith at Home stuff that's all about prayer. Especially for those groups, you could definitely run one of these things just with Vibrant Faith at Home activities. We're really excited about the stuff that's been coming out of Church Next. There are definitely some Church Next folks at the conference. I don't know if any of them are in the room right now. But you could definitely, I think, build a hybrid network around some collection of Church Next classes. And when Chris Yaw came to our eFormation conference last year and said, what advice do you have for us? My number one thing is make sure that you're coaching congregations about how to make the Church Next tool a community experience. Whether that's a parish-wide experience or just a small group experience. You don't want to just give them the keys and the password to the Saints Within's Church Next account and say, go nuts and be an individual taking this class. Because 4 people are going to do that. The 4 people left who want to learn about Augustine and whatever are going to sign up. And actually, Church Next doesn't have a whole lot of content like that. They've been smart, I think, about what they've chosen. But the 4 gung-ho people are gonna take the class and feel good about the gold star they get at the end. But your job as a faith formation person, whether you're doing this as a formal hybrid network or not, is to get groups of people in your congregation taking those courses together, interacting about them, sharing, etc. So you can definitely use Church Next. I think spiritual practices are an ideal content area for these kinds of classes because that's stuff you do at home anyway. So the sort of flipped classroom idea is really ideal. This link, if you're in the slides, is to what I think is a pretty good research source from Credo. That you can get it as a book, you can get it as individual PDF chapters, and you can get it as podcast episodes. But it's the sort of content about like 25 different spiritual practices. Everything from your traditional contemplative prayer practices to things like body prayer, and there's one computer practice. How is using the computer a spiritual practice, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's content sort of tailor-made for this kind of hybrid faith formation. I never said at the beginning, the hybrid is sort of borrowed from the distance learning literature. A hybrid course is a course that you take partly online and partly in person. So that's where the hybrid comes from. These video programs that SSJE has gotten really good at doing, Society of St. John the Evangelist in Cambridge, sort of monastic wisdom for your everyday life, really good content. They had great experience with last year's Lent program, Praying Our Lives, and this year's program is called Love Life, and it's a study of the Gospel of John. there's a great analog resource here that you could use, and there's stacks of them all over the place. The idea here is that just like last year, there'll be a video every day. 2 to 3 minute video. Danny, is that right? 2 to 3 minute video, and so the expansion for this year is that here's your sort of video reflection guide, and you can actually. This is the first time I actually get to do this. So Jamie and Connor worked with our center on putting this together, and so these pages are actually perforated, and you can tear out your reflection guide for the week. So it's got a little prompt for each of that week's videos, with a little question for reflection, a little place to write it, and a place to like fold it up and stick it in your Bible or in your pocket or in your laptop case or whatever. So it's an attempt to turn a sort of once a day episodic thing into a bit more of a formalized program where a group of people together could watch and engage with this content from the brothers and each other. So I commend this to you. It's all free. You can download the booklets if you want, or you can buy them. SSJE is connected with Forward Movement, and so if you can buy them basically at cost from Forward Movement. So we've had a chance to sort of see it behind the scenes and think it's going to be a great thing. And again, stuff that sort of flipped classroom type content is ideal here, because what you're trying to do is give people stuff to engage with when they're not at church. And so YouTube videos are great. Some of you may have heard about Redeem the Commute. There's a church planner outside of, is it Toronto, or is it, I forget, there's a church planner somewhere in Canada who is working on planning a church in a bedroom community somewhere outside of a big city. And the first X years of that is just going to be doing this great online content to try to redeem your commute. So it's all of this faith formation stuff that you can read on the train, that you can listen to in the car. There's little mini classes, again, sort of tailor-made for the kind of thing we're doing here. Some people are adapting traditional curricula and taking the content from these sturdy, trusted programs and figuring out ways to turn that into home activities. Episcopal Children's Curriculum is published by the Center for the Ministry of Teaching. It's free online, so it's free, which makes it great for this. And there were these great take-home cards. When you used to be able to buy it on paper, you would send the take-home cards with the kids from Sunday school, and they'd have the home activity and the stuff to talk about right there. So I think this is a strong candidate. I think Day was using material from Living the Good News and another sort of well-known Sunday school curriculum. So you could adapt it, but then there again, your questions are: how do we use this content and use this sort of scope and sequence, this way of looking at the Bible and the faith, etc. How do we adapt that to getting people, to equipping parents to have those conversations at home with their kids? And so there are, how do you select what they actually read at home? How do you select the kinds of questions? How do you get them talking to each other via the hub? All those things are things that you, as the reflective practitioner, have to think about as you go. I think this could work for book or Bible study, and we've seen some congregations starting to try to do Bible studies, even kind of prayer group type things. You could even do them once in a while via Google Hangout or something like that. Google Hangouts have gotten really robust and sturdy, and they're finally now to the point, I think, where they're more or less, close to error-proof. About the only thing that's a hassle is you have to have a Google Plus account. But Hangouts, I think, are a great way. Let's do the in-person Bible study once a month, and then we'll do the other ones from home. I think sort of late night after the kids are in bed is a great opportunity here. You want to think about sort of brain power at that time of night, but I think there's a possibility there. I also will continue to say that I think podcasts are just a great way to get people thinking about their life of faith wherever they are in their day. So I think there are some podcasts that would lend themselves really well to a sort of discussion-based hybrid network. In fact, the On Being program by Krista Tippett, you can actually get from Church Publishing, right? Yeah. Some curriculum already built on, okay, listen to episodes or excerpts from episodes of the On Being show. It used to be Speaking of Faith, or is that okay? So if you want to go to those discussion questions, they're already written. So you can say, here's the episode, watch it when you have a chance this week. Here's our question, chime in when you get a chance. So I think podcasts great. YouTube videos, great. The Five Loaves is this guy and his wife, I think, out in California somewhere, making these kind of between the Sundays kind of content. Lots of great stuff on YouTube from Soul Pancake. The Kid President video are pretty awesome. So lots of ideas for content. Questions?
It's an old person question, but what do you do about copyright? Like, I understand if you're embedding a video, but what if you're using part of the Episcopal Children's curriculum or questions from On Being? How do you share that legally?
Yeah, well, so you do want to think through those things. We try to be a very. In fact, I'm not entirely convinced that showing a big room full of people a YouTube video is allowed. I've given up on trying to ask permission every time I show a YouTube video, but I think that is not actually a copyright compliant thing. If you're having if you're having individuals watch things on their own, one-on-one, that is definitely a compliant sort of thing. In the case of Episcopal Children's curriculum, you are hereby granted permission to do whatever the hell you want with it. I know Day, I think, asked for permission to distribute certain things. Sharon, you want to say more?
Yeah, as far as, a church using curriculum like Living the Good News or other things, as long as your church has bought that, you can share it with your members however you want. You just can't just put it up on the website for anybody else to access. But if you have a member area that's password protected, anybody in your church can have access to that.
One of the great reasons for doing this in a closed Facebook group or something is that you're not taking that risk. Jamie?
At SSJE, we use Creative Commons license on our website, so it means you can take and use it as long as you don't commercialize it. So we notice that. So you can check on websites to see if they're using Creative Commons licensing.
And never be afraid to ask on copyright stuff. People are often more than willing, in many cases eager to have you using their stuff. They just want to be credited for it and to hear about it. And that's of course what Creative Commons is about. But yeah, lots of good opportunities.
Is there some podcasts you're talking about that's audio, some video pieces, some written pieces, an advantage or disadvantage to each of those?
Yeah, so
Getting ahead of you?
No, not necessarily. So one of my sort of best practice recommendations here somewhere. I was talking here about the hub, but I think it's true of the content as well. You want to choose the thing that is appropriate for the group of people you're using. Again, this whole movement is about going from a sort of one-size-fits-all sort of broadcast approach, even if that's a broadcast within your community, to a personalized approach. So you want to let it be driven by what people actually want to learn, if that's possible. Sometimes you have to help provide some initiative there. But if you've got a bunch of parents asking, can we learn about X? I don't know anything about X. That's a great way to be prompted into some content. So in matters of the technology and in matters of the content, I think you want to talk to your people. Go with your gut, talk to your people, and also acknowledge, I think I said something somewhere about, learning styles, generational differences. I mean, I'm a just rabid podcast listener. And so, I love audio stuff. And I'm always irritated when there's video stuff because it means I have to like stand still and watch it while I'm at my desk or whatever. And it also it chews up bandwidth if I don't have an internet connection. So I love audio only content, but other people are much more visual learners and really need the or would prefer the video. So yeah, go with your gut, go with what's there, give them what you want to teach, get some feedback. There's lots of good web tools for getting feedback from the people involved, including, if you're doing this via a closed Facebook group, you ask the question, how would you prefer a video or an audio file this week? All that kind of thing. The great thing about not having the curriculum out there is that we get to make those decisions in ways that are tailored to the people that we're serving.
I have it was based on that list.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So I just want to ask you your opinion, and I'm happy with what I chose to do at our church, is having also a step of creating community norms.
Yes.
And that would be in two places. That would be the community within your church, and then it would be the community of learners.
Yeah.
Of, what does it mean to be in dialogue with one another? How are we going to use these social medias? What are the parameters?
Yeah.
And what we did was to write a social media policy
Mm-hmm.
that is non-legalistic, comes out of who we are and love.
Awesome.
And we did it based on our mission statement to say this is supportive of our mission statement, which was to live God's love, tell God's story. And so that sense of
Cool.
engaging in that, and then also opening it up to the wider public, because we have an obligation to be God's space out in the social media world. So,
That's great.
I mean, it seemed to work. The vestry,
Yeah.
adopted it, and if you want to see a sample, I'm happy to share it.
Awesome. Okay. Jennifer Gambler at Episcopal Prayer on Twitter. Sorry.
No, at Jennifer C. It's Jennifer's one and Gamber at Gmail. Rather
Okay.
that.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, and there's some great sample policies. I love on the church social media chat on Tuesday nights. There's a tab on the blog that goes along with that chat. That's I think it's rules of engagement. Lots of good sample policies out there. I can recommend some too. But sorry, go ahead.
Just better yet, it's going to be on the member-only site.
There we
So
go.
I don't want a ton of emails.
Yeah.
But so go to the Forum on Member site, and it'll be a downloadable file.
Okay. There we go. Member benefit.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no. I was going to say, hang on. Social media policy. Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I said in the beginning that this is kind of a combination of these hybrid network things and then sort of classic small group theory. There's a great book called, I think it's called The Big Book of Small Groups. I took a class in seminary in small group ministry, and there's great resources. Obviously, they're not tailored to hybrid small groups and to using the web to do part of your convening. But those principles are very much still in play here. And one thing I'm really gratified about in the whole conversation about technology in church is that we've now finally gotten to the point where I think more or less people have accepted the fact that this distinction that we want to build between the virtual world and the real world is kind of counterproductive, and it's this is one of the places that we're living our lives. And in most cases, the people that we primarily connect with are people that we already know, quote unquote, in real life. So the great lesson here is that your good ministry instincts apply online. And sometimes they need to be adapted, but there are very obvious, I think, analogs of practices, safe church type stuff if you're doing a youth group type thing on this. Randall Curtis has a great curriculum lesson plan and strategy guide thing on using Facebook with youth groups. Faithfully Facebook, yeah. And one of the great things that he suggests there is, you want to start a group and invite all the people to be in the group, invite another adult to be in the group. You're not friending a person directly. So, what are we seeing there except that the working out of the safeguarding God's children rules for the digital space? And you all are savvy ministers of the gospel and can think through how those rules are going to apply in a different setting. I wanted to say a brief word about the online part of this. What might it actually look like in a couple of different ways? I think the three obvious choices for the quote unquote hub is either online groups, which mean a number of things. A blog, either closed or open, where people can comment, or a sort of traditional email listserv. And I've listed them kind of in the order that I think is best. But again, what really will decide that is you knowing your people and their technology preferences and habits. So let me show you two different examples here. This is my little toy group that I use when I talk about this idea. This is a closed Facebook group, which means that you can search for its existence, but you can't see any of the content unless you ask. I think closed is better than secret. I think secret rings alarm bells for me as a minister, but closed sounds appropriate. So this is my little mock-up of, and obviously there's not any interaction on here because this is just me doing a bunch of sample posts. But my hope is that this can sort of show you what this process might look like. So I started this group called Saints Within's Prayer at Home Formation Network. I invited some people to join it. I wrote a little description of what it is. A committed group of Saints Within's parents learning to pray at home with their families. This page is for sharing each week's prayer practice and connecting each other with ideas, prayers, and support. So I'm sort of expressing the mission of this group in the description of it on Facebook. So that's what's going on there. I wanted to emphasize, we've got the in-person component as well. So here's my little event invitation for the. I'm imagining that this is a 50-day Easter to Pentecost prayer at home group. I tend to think almost totally seasonally at this point, and so that was my little toy thing. So okay, so we meet once at the beginning and once at the end. That's about once a month. And so there's my invite to the family event. Here's a fake picture of members praying